Maple trees produce lots of great maple sap, but that maple sap is only 2% sugar. The other 98% is primarily water. There are trace minerals, there's some antioxidants and electrolytes. And to make maple syrup, we need to boil and evaporate the water. And while we're boiling, imagine putting a big pot of water on your stovetop, getting that to boil, and then evaporating all the water. So you have about a ½ an inch of water on the bottom. And that's what you do to make maple syrup. But here at the Uihlein Forest, we have over 100,000 gallons of maple sap that we have to boil in a single year. But fortunately, we have equipment like this large evaporator that makes it more efficient, but it still can take hours and hours to do that and use a lot of really intense energy. So we have new technology that speeds up that process. You're probably familiar with osmosis, but in reverse osmosis, the reverse part is that we're using a high pressure pump to force the solution against the membrane, so we get two very different concentrations within our solutions on either side. So the great benefit of reverse osmosis is that we can really reduce our energy consumption for turning sap into syrup. So for example, going into reverse osmosis, we'll have about 40 gallons, this barrel full of maple sap, that's only 2% sugar. Coming out of the reverse osmosis, we'll have 4 gallons of concentrated sugar that's around 18% sugar. Up in our loft portion, we have tanks that are going to be filled with the concentrated maple sap that came out of our reverse osmosis. So all that sap is going to pass through all these small pipes above that boiling sap. And the steam as it's rising up is going to build around those pipes, and that energy is going to preheat the maple sap so that it's almost boiling before it actually drops down into our back pan. As that maple syrup moves to the evaporator and gets to that finishing point, we're going to be measuring the finished maple syrup to make sure that it's the correct density and ready to draw off. And so we're using that little glass tube that floats inside the cup of maple syrup. And when the little red line on the glass tube floats at the surface, we know that that's the correct density of maple syrup. And when we know the correct density of our finished maple syrup, we can use this automatic draw-off machine to set the final temperature point for drawing off the finished maple syrup for that day. The final step of finishing off that maple syrup is filtering it. So we're pumping it through a filter, and then we're going to be sending that finished maple syrup into one of these large barrels. All of our bottling and packaging then happens in the off season when we have more availability. So as you can see, there's a lot of steps to transform that maple sap from our trees into that finished product of maple syrup. But thankfully, we have all these advances in technology that make that process a lot more efficient.